Silence is often described as peaceful, something we're supposed to enjoy. Something calming, something restorative. But for many people, silence doesn't feel like that at all. It feels tense, awkward, unsettling. Not dramatically uncomfortable, just uncomfortable enough to want to escape it. You reach for your phone, you turn something on, you start doing something, anything. And afterward, you might wonder why being quiet felt so hard in the first place. This episode isn't about learning to enjoy silence. It's about understanding why silence can feel uncomfortable even when nothing is obviously wrong. Because that discomfort isn't random, it's a response. When external noise fades, something subtle happens. Your attention turns inward, not intentionally, automatically. Silence removes input. And when input drops, the mind doesn't stay empty. It starts scanning. The mind is designed to stay engaged with information. When there's sound, movement, conversation, or activity, attention flows outward. But when those things disappear, attention has nowhere to go but in. So the mind begins to fill the space. Thoughts arise, memories surface. Sensations become more noticeable. Not because silence caused them, but because silence stopped covering them. This is often where discomfort begins, because internal experience is rarely neutral. There's usually some background tension, some unfinished feeling, some quiet unease that wasn't demanding attention before. Silence doesn't create that, it reveals it. Many people assume that if silence feels uncomfortable, it means they're doing something wrong, that they should be calmer, more centered, better at being alone with themselves. But silence isn't a skill test, it's a mirror, and mirrors don't add anything, they just reflect what's already there. Another reason silence can feel uncomfortable is that it removes structure. When something is playing or something is happening, time is organized for you. There's a beginning, a middle, an end. Silence has no built-in structure. There's no signal telling you what comes next. And the mind doesn't like open-endedness. It prefers predictability. So in silence, the mind starts generating its own content. Questions, worries, plans, reflections. Not because you asked it to, but because it's trying to restore a sense of continuity. This is why silence often feels busy instead of empty. It's also why silence can feel exposing. Without external noise, there's nothing buffering you from your own inner state. Thoughts that were background noise become foreground. Emotions that were muted become clearer. Even physical sensations, like restlessness or tightness, become more noticeable. Not because they intensified, but because attention has nowhere else to land. This can be surprising. You might sit down expecting quiet to feel calming, only to notice irritation or sadness or a vague sense of unease. And because there's no obvious cause, the discomfort can feel confusing. But confusion doesn't mean danger. It means something internal is being noticed. Silence also removes distraction from evaluation. When things are quiet, the mind often turns toward meaning. It asks questions like, what am I doing? How am I doing? What does this say about me? Not out of self-criticism, but out of habit. The mind uses silence as an opportunity to check in, sometimes too thoroughly. This is one reason silence can feel heavier at certain times than others. If life feels uncertain or unresolved or emotionally dense, silence has more material to work with. Not because silence is the problem, but because it removes the noise that was keeping those things at a distance. Another important point is that silence is culturally unfamiliar. Many environments reward constant engagement. Sound, updates, interaction, responsiveness. In that context, silence can feel like a gap that needs to be filled. Not because it's wrong, but because it's uncommon. So discomfort can come simply from unfamiliarity. It's also worth noting that silence doesn't feel the same to everyone. Some people experience it as grounding, others as unsettling. This difference isn't about temperament, it's about association, what silence has meant in the past. For some, silence was connected to safety, rest, privacy. For others, silence meant tension, uncertainty, waiting. Those associations matter because the body remembers context, not just content. So when silence appears now, it doesn't arrive as a blank slate. It arrives carrying old meaning. This doesn't mean silence is good or bad. It means it's informative. It tells you something about what your attention normally moves away from. And noticing that doesn't require changing anything. It just requires recognition. One of the most misunderstood things about silence is the idea that it's supposed to feel peaceful immediately. That expectation alone can create discomfort. Because when silence doesn't match the expectation, the mind interprets that as failure. But silence isn't a destination, it's a condition, and conditions don't guarantee specific feelings. It's also important to say this: feeling uncomfortable in silence doesn't mean you're avoiding something intentionally. Avoidance doesn't have to be conscious. It often happens simply because the mind learned that activity feels easier than stillness. Not better, just easier. That learning can happen gradually. A screen fills a pause, music fills a gap, conversation fills quiet. Over time, those choices stop feeling like choices. They become defaults, and silence starts to feel unusual. None of this means silence needs to be embraced or practiced or mastered. That's not the point here. The point is understanding why the reaction exists, because once something makes sense, it often feels less threatening. Silence can feel uncomfortable because it redirects attention inward, removes structure, reveals unresolved experience, and interrupts familiarity. That combination is enough to create unease, even in calm environments. And that unease doesn't mean something is wrong. It means something is being noticed. Silence can also feel uncomfortable because it slows things down. When there's noise or activity, experience moves quickly. One moment replaces the next. In silence, there's more space between moments. Thoughts linger, sensations last longer. Emotions don't get interrupted. That slowness can feel heavy, especially if you're used to momentum. Not because something is wrong, but because slowing down changes the texture of experience. This is why silence can feel different depending on how full or depleted you feel. When energy is low or attention is already taxed, silence doesn't feel spacious. It feels like there's nothing to lean on. It's also worth noticing that silence often brings awareness to subtle internal states we don't usually label. Mild irritation, low-grade anxiety, background sadness, a sense of pressure without a clear source. These aren't dramatic emotions, they're ambient ones. They exist beneath the surface most of the time. Silence doesn't create them, it just removes the distractions that were keeping them in the background. Because these states are subtle, they can feel harder to interpret. There's no clear story, no obvious trigger, just a feeling that something is off. And the mind doesn't like ambiguity, so it may try to explain the discomfort, or move away from it, or replace it with something more familiar. Again, not as a conscious choice, but as a reflex. This is why people often describe silence as awkward, even when they're alone. Awkwardness usually isn't about other people, it's about uncertainty. Silence creates a moment where nothing is clearly required of you. No response, no performance, no role. And that absence can feel strangely exposed. All of this helps explain why silence is often misunderstood. It's not that silence is inherently calming, and it's not that discomfort means something is wrong. Silence simply removes structure, noise, and distraction at the same time. That combination reveals whatever state you're already in. Sometimes that feels peaceful. Sometimes it feels tense, often it feels mixed, and all of that makes sense. If silence feels uncomfortable, The mind usually responds in a predictable way. That's what we'll look at next. Why you start talking to yourself when things go quiet. If any of this felt familiar, and if you noticed something about how you respond to quiet moments, you're welcome to share it in the comments. Putting it into words can sometimes clarify what's been happening internally. If you would like to support the channel, subscribing is one simple way to do that. It also helps these videos reach more people who might find them useful. I'll see you in the next video.